Welcome back to this very special edition of Channel 2 News. Tragic legacy, the unknown story of the Indian residential school program. As we mentioned, Western New York was home to one of the more than 350 residential schools in the United States. And now 2 on Your Side's Terry Belke takes a look back at the history of the Thomas Indian School.
Over the passage of time, events can become distorted or completely forgotten. In the case of Native American people across the United States, many of their chronicles have been lost or deliberately unrecorded. We here in Western New York are as guilty of that as anywhere, and the annals of the Thomas Indian School and the Cattaraugus Territory are a living testament to the folly of losing our shared history.
It's a story that needs to be told. It also needs to be told for the children who went here and their families. They need their story to be told, and their families need to know what happened at the Thomas Indian School.
Indian boarding schools in the 1800s were widespread across the U.S. and Canada, a direct result of the failing reservation system. For many reasons, conditions on the reservations were brutal, Native people falling to a many-headed hydra of social ills from being forced to live as pariahs in American society. Poverty, disease, alcoholism, and domestic abuse ran rampant through their communities, forcing Indian families who were unable to care for their children to surrender them to boarding schools, or worse, having them taken forcibly by federal and state authorities. The Thomas Indian School is still considered to be among the worst of them all.
The traditional structures, the traditional institutions for taking care of children who might be abandoned or orphaned or whatever, broke down because you were attacking the communities and the families, and they no longer were able to take care of their own. And so what do? You create institutions to take care of them, and that's what the Thomas Indian School was all about, and the Thomas Asylum for orphan and destitute Indian children.
The school actually began as a somewhat benevolent institution. It was founded in 1855 by 2 Presbyterian missionaries, the Reverend Asher Wright and his wife Laura. Indian children from across the state were taken in, including those from the Seneca Nation. At the time, the Wrights were still teaching the Seneca language to their charges, as well as employing teachers who spoke Seneca and were sympathetic to their plight. But that all changed in 1875 when the New York State Board of Charities took over.
And when the state started taking over, they started making new rules and changing, and so it was no longer able to speak your language. And some people were, forced to go there. Some people had good experiences. Majority of people didn't have good experiences.
We bring them in, clean them up, and start them on their way to civilization.
For many of the children of the Thomas Indian School, the experience was traumatic right from the beginning. Elliot Tallchief was only 5 years old when a state social worker came to take he and his 6-year-old sister away from their family.
We were small. We just dragged us into the car. We were crying and I guess screaming too, I don't know. But I remember crying all the way, and once how do you get used to it, It just, the tears stop, and eventually you fit in.
Carson Waterman is a renowned Seneca artist. He turned 5 shortly after his admittance to the school. He says he learned some hard lessons at an early age, lessons that no child should have to learn.
After a number of years, you get used to it, and you get kind of toughened to it, and you think, well, I'm on my own. I'm the only person I can rely on.
Carson and Elliot both recall being punished for speaking the Seneca language. It was just the first step in stripping them of their culture in an effort to force assimilation to the American way of life. The horror stories from Thomas are atrocious.
I had one cousin I heard, they thought she had passed on. It was the middle of winter, the ground was real hard, so I guess there was a place up in the attic where they would keep the kids that had passed on in there until they could break the ground, and she wasn't passed on, she was in a coma, and she woke up and all her friends and stuff were dead around her.
We used to watch movies on Saturday in the gymnasium, and that's where we used to go for movies. And they got us to the point where we would cheer when the cavalry came you know what I mean, and to defeat the Indians.
There was the severe emotional and psychological effects from being treated as Indians, from them realizing that they were being punished for being Indians, and if they're being punished for being Indians, there must be something wrong with being Indians, and therefore there's something inferior.
Many of the children were institutionalized at Thomas until they were legally able to leave, making them dependent on the rigid routine of the institution. They had no job and often no family to return to. If they did return to the reservation, it was to crushing poverty and the other numerous ills that plagued them. Others were simply lost. Few left unscathed. And when you get out, I mean, you weren't really prepared for anything, right?
No, that was. I mean, where are you supposed to go? Leave? You know, I mean, there's no. There was very few jobs at that time.
I looked at the thing now from the point where I was brought up here to the point of when I quit, is why they put us through this. To erase who you are. That was the point.
The Thomas Indian School closed in 1957, long after most other Indian boarding schools were shut down. Some of the buildings still stand, and for many of the children, the only trace of their existence are some names scrawled on an attic rafter in a decrepit dormitory, and a few forlorn headstones in an all but forgotten cemetery across from the old school. The repercussions, however, are still being felt in the Seneca Nation today. Communities were shattered, and their language is fading despite efforts to teach it. This is particularly damaging because traditional ceremonies use the Seneca language exclusively. This further hampers efforts to keep their proud culture alive. New York has never taken responsibility for what happened, nor has the state issued an apology. Though the scars still run deep, the nation remains strong and continues to look to the future. The motto was, "Kill the Indian and save the child." Do you think they accomplished their goal?
They did, yes. Because look at what effect it had on us, not only back then, but today, this very day.
My grandpa, he did teach me, you know, things that were Indian and stuff. And he's like, if somebody says something bad to you, he says, say Nyawe to them. And in our language, Nyawe means thank you. And you might think, well, why did he say that? He said, you say Nyawe to them because it gives it back to them, and you don't carry it with you. He's like, it's up to you to decide what you're going to carry and what you're not going to carry.
And as you drive around the former campus today, you'll see signs where they've preserved parts of the history to act as a reminder. One building renovated into the Peacekeepers Court. This makeshift memorial out front dedicated to the children lost, and remnants of the old cemetery can still be seen. On grounds once used as dormitories stand senior housing, and still many abandoned structures dot the landscape. This monument out front stands as a symbol of perseverance and survival. Up next, we ask the tough questions of our state and federal leaders about what needs to be done to make up for the past. And we also check in with a community group that is working to help people still dealing with the ripples of that past.